For years, we've accepted that the Viking footprint in North America began around the year 1000 and ended just as swiftly, the story anchored at a lonely Newfoundland outpost. But recent ancient DNA discoveries quietly challenge that timeline, suggesting Scottish Vikings may have crossed the Atlantic far earlier and from settlements long ignored in our history books. If the evidence is true, everything we know about the origins of transatlantic exploration and Scotland's forgotten role needs to be reconsidered. What hidden clues led researchers to rewrite this century-old narrative? The year 1000 has long stood as the accepted moment when Vikings first touched North American shores. Saga writers painted a picture of a single, bold expedition, Leif Erikson and his crew landing at Newfoundland, building Lance aux Meadows, then vanishing back into legend. But beneath this tidy narrative, the practical needs of Viking life complicate the story. Viking communities depended on movement and trade. They built their world on the backs of ships, some weighing over 30 tons, each demanding an immense amount of timber. In Greenland and Norway, centuries of settlement had stripped forests bare. Constructing or repairing a single longship required up to 30 cubic meters of prime wood, the yield of an entire stand of mature trees. Timber wasn't just cargo, it was survival. The search for it shaped every route, every risk, every decision to push further into the Atlantic. Professor Bjorn Eriksson, a maritime archaeologist, has spent years tracing the logistics behind these crossings. He explains that a fully loaded longship could sail hundreds of miles, but only if the crew believed they'd find what they needed at the journey's end. Timber, iron, even basic food, these were the silent forces behind every voyage. In Greenland's harsh climate, the need for wood was especially urgent. The sagas mention Markland, a wooded coast to the west, but rarely pause to consider the scale of these expeditions. How many ships, how many men, how much risk each journey carried. Most of what survives comes from sagas written centuries later, colored by memory and myth. The everyday realities, supply, demand, the relentless hunt for resources are mostly left out. Archaeological discoveries, like the carefully dated wood at Lance aux Meadows, offer rare glimpses into the true scope of these travels. Radiocarbon and tree ring analysis pin the site's activity between 991 and 1021 CE. Yet the constant need for timber hints at a wider web of crossings, possibly including crews from Orkney or northern Scotland, each with their own reasons to look west. If necessity drove these journeys, how many crossings have slipped through the cracks of history, waiting for new evidence to surface? Orkney rises from the North Sea with low green hills and battered cliffs, a crossroads between Scotland and the open Atlantic. Here, around 800 CE, the Norse arrived, not as a passing force, but as settlers. Archaeologists have traced the layers of these settlements. Longhouses built atop earlier Pictish sites, Norse tools mingled with Celtic jewelry, and burial mounds where swords and brooches rest beside local pottery. In these islands, the lines between Viking and Scot blurred. The newcomers married into local families, adopted native customs, and built communities that would last for generations. By the middle of the 9th century, cereal pollen appears in Orkney's peat, evidence that these settlers were growing their own barley and oats, not just raiding or trading. This quiet agricultural footprint marks a shift from conquest to permanence. Trade flourished in these northern strongholds. Cod, caught in the cold waters off Orkney and Shetland, was salted and shipped south, reaching markets as far as the European mainland by the 10th century. Archaeological finds of cod bones from this era reveal a network that stretched across the North Atlantic. These islands became more than outposts, they were launch pads. The Norse of Orkney and Shetland built and repaired ships, gathered supplies, and planned voyages that would carry them beyond the horizon. The skills and resources clustered here made it possible to reach farther than their ancestors ever had. This vibrant trade network set the stage for future voyages. The blending of cultures in Orkney created something new, a people who saw themselves as both Norse and native, speaking languages that borrowed from both traditions, living in houses that combined old and new designs. The sagas would later speak of earls and chieftains who ruled these islands, But the real story lies in the day-to-day lives of farmers, fishers, and traders who made this place their home. Their descendants still walk these shores, carrying traces of both Viking and Pictish ancestry. Their everyday lives whisper of a shared identity. With such deep roots and thriving communities, it's natural to wonder, did these northern settlements serve as the true springboard for journeys across the Atlantic? If so, what clues might still lie hidden beneath the grass and stone, waiting for a patient hand or a new technology to reveal their story? In a quiet laboratory, far from the wind and salt of the Atlantic, Dr. Elspeth MacLeod begins her work with a single fragment of ancient bone. The sample is small, a sliver of petrous bone from a Viking-era burial, dense as stone and tucked behind the ear, chosen because it shelters DNA from centuries of decay. Petrous bones can yield up to 10 times more ancient DNA than other parts of the skeleton, making them a rare prize for geneticists searching for traces of the distant past. Every step is designed to keep the past uncontaminated by the present. Gloves, masks, and full-body suits stand between the scientist and the sample. The air in the room is filtered and pressurized, with ultraviolet lights running overnight to destroy stray DNA. The bone is cleaned, then ground into a fine powder. From there, the powder is combined with chemicals that coax ancient genetic fragments out of hiding. Each fragment is shorter than a strand of hair, most less than 70 base pairs, but anything over 30 is considered a good sign. Barcoding comes next. Every sample receives a unique genetic tag, so that even when hundreds are sequenced together, each fragment can be traced back to its origin. The DNA is copied millions of times, then loaded into a machine that reads the code, letter by letter. Specialized software, like Map Damage 2, checks for the scars of time, chemical changes that only appear after centuries in the ground. These patterns help confirm that the DNA is truly ancient, not a stray trace from a modern researcher. Earlier generations of historians could only guess at origins based on artifacts or burial style. Now, the story is written in the molecules themselves. The process is slow, painstaking, and exacting, but with every successful extraction, another piece of the puzzle becomes visible. What might these fragments reveal about journeys that left so few traces behind? Ancient DNA analysis begins with fragments, bone, tooth, even a single strand of barley, each a silent witness to journeys across the Atlantic. Dr. Aisha Hassan, a geneticist specializing in Norse-era migrations, studies these clues with a careful eye. She sifts through the genetic code, searching for patterns that might connect the people of Orkney and northern Scotland to distant Newfoundland. In the laboratory, sequences are compared against a global reference panel. Haplogroup I1, a marker often found among Norse-descended men in Scottish lands, appears in several ancient burials from Orkney, but so far not in any material from Newfoundland. Instead, the DNA from Meadows fits the broader Scandinavian profile, consistent with what's known from Norway and Iceland, but lacking the unique signatures of the Scottish Norse. Other lines of evidence are just as intriguing. In a peat core from a Newfoundland lake, radiocarbon dating points to a layer from around 950 CE. Within that layer, a handful of barley grains are discovered, charred, ancient, but without the genetic fingerprint to place them firmly in the Old World. The grains' age predates the canonical timeline, but their journey remains uncertain. Soil acidity and centuries of decay erase most traces, leaving only hints where certainty is craved. Material finds add another layer. At a coastal site, archaeologists uncover remnants of a ship repair area, timber offcuts, iron slag, and evidence of a forge reaching temperatures near 1,200 degrees Celsius. The context dates to between 940 and 970 CE, but erosion and the absence of diagnostic artifacts cloud the picture. No single discovery stands alone. Each piece, DNA, plant remains, forged iron, offers a clue, but none delivers a definitive answer. Dr. Hassan reflects, if these fragments could speak, what stories would they tell about who crossed the Atlantic and when? The search continues, always circling back to the question, how much history still lies hidden beneath the soil, waiting for science to catch up. Today, every strand of ancient DNA reminds us how much history remains hidden, waiting beneath soil, stone, and bias. Our understanding of the past is only as complete as the evidence we uncover. Each new discovery rewrites the map, challenging what we think we know. What might we find next?